Hi, I'm Dan Neer, and this is Pink Floyd's David Gilmour.
As satisfying as any tour we've been on, for me anyway. The shows themselves are terrific fun.
Here's Nick Mason.
I think this last show was perhaps a bit more than that. I think it was the sort of development of. It was the best show we've done so far.
The forward momentum didn't stop there. Pink Floyd's tape decks were running during their shows in Europe last year, and they've released the best of the recordings on their latest CD, Pulse. Over the next 4 up-close outings, we'll be examining that album and the rest of the Floyd legend. Welcome to Part 1 of Media America Radio's presentation of Pink Floyd. Up Close. A Pink Floyd concert is a smorgasbord of sound and sight, an unforgettable experience. Here's Nick Mason.
We were able to build on what we'd done on the 87-88 tour in terms of just building a new stage, but knowing what we wanted to avoid, which was the big black box, which had become the standard rock sort of environment. And I think just sort of moving on and doing that in itself was, to me, it felt like, as I say, just a real step forward.
Were there more innovations?
I don't think there were particularly more innovations. It was probably less sort of actual articulated movement from the sort of mechanical elements on the stage than the previous show. But again, this comes back to that lead time. With more design time, I think we were able to sort of make more effective use of what we had and what we were running.
Here's Nick Mason and David Gilmour discussing a hobby that became a song.
What's the story?
When did you start learning to fly?
When did I start learning to fly? About
Why?
4 or 5 years ago. I was pushed into it really by a friend of mine who I used to do some motor racing with, and as an aerobatic pilot, and he convinced me that I really badly needed to learn to fly. This was particularly interesting because I always used to be rather frightened of flying. I was well known in the band.
Needed to learn to fly badly.
Breaking out into a sweat at the sight of anything with wings on. So he introduced me to someone he said was the ideal man to teach me. And in this, he was quite right. He introduced me to a lunatic called Brendan O'Brien, who at the moment is now landing his aeroplane on the back of a truck at Air Displays. And Brendan taught me to fly, and I thought this was such a wonderful way of spending the time, and I realised
a lot of money.
Flying was going to be so expensive. I needed to lure some other idiot into it to share the costs. So I persuaded Dave that he needed to learn to fly, and therefore we could share an aeroplane.
You're back up close with Pink Floyd's Nick Mason, who takes us back to the 60s when a couple of already established rock icons influenced Floyd's fledgling career.
Either Cream or Hendrix, who were the beginnings of a college band. They were really working, and they looked so amazing, and it was such a stunning experience. It really made me think, now that is something I would like. I mean, we did a few gigs, in fact, early gigs with them. At the Queen's Hall in Leeds, that's one I can remember. A particularly nice tram shed. And I think, it was a sort of seven bands on the bill, and we were 7 and they were 1. But it was strong stuff.
Sigma 6 begat T-Set, which became the Megadeths. In 1967, they settled on the name Pink Floyd. That was their second single, See Emily Play. The original lineup consisted of bassist Roger Waters, Rick Wright on keyboards, drummer Nick Mason, and guitarist-vocalist Syd Barrett.
He was extremely talented. He was a natural writer. I mean, in a way that, say, someone like Roger really worked at writing, so it would just flow from, and both music and lyrics.
Painter as well.
Yeah.
He was a very good painter.
Yeah. He originally came down to London to go to art school, and he was just very easy to live with, easy to work with.
Certainly, when in Cambridge, when we were all very young, he was a very, very popular person. Everyone wanted to have him around, and he was definitely the guy that everyone thought would succeed at something.
However, it soon became clear that Syd was becoming too erratic to continue.
I don't think there was ever a final snapping. There was just a gradual sort of parting the way. So I think things were difficult for a long time. And I think we probably sort of almost avoided facing up to the fact that Sid was having more and more trouble sort of working within a band. And I think, it's quite well documented, the theory was that we would ask Dave to join the band and carry on as a 5-piece.
When David Gilmour signed on with Pink Floyd in 1968 during the recording of Saucerful of Secrets, the band was in transition, but not without direction. Nick Mason.
I think Saucer, in fact, provided all sorts of clues as to the way we might end up going. But Meddle was certainly it was certainly more convincing than Ummagumma or Atom Heart Mother.
And I guess for you, Dave, you were kind of more, I guess, if I'm not mistaken, structured, and I guess the band was kind of experimental, and it was a case of you getting adjusted or vice versa.
I think after Sid left, we were all a bit lost in our direction. And Saucerful of Secrets certainly shows a direction forward, which we then followed through Atom Heart Mother and Ummagumma, but not terribly well, I think. And I think what you can say about Meddle is that it all came together very well. It follows the direction that we kind of were established on, but actually does it successfully.
Pink Floyd has developed one of the most elaborate stage shows ever, combining visual pyrotechnics with audio explosiveness in addition to their musical outpourings. How does David Gilmour deal with it all?
Shut your eyes and hope for the best.
I was really struck by this one image in the video, the performance, where you're sitting there with that lap steel, and just as it's shot over your shoulder, you see all these lights. It's just nutty,
It is, yeah.
And it hasn't ever become a distraction? It never bothered you at any point? Or?
It has, yes. In one of these days. We have lost it completely in one of these days, a couple of times, totally. But actually, usually more because of where Gary's banging the door sound, isn't it?
What is that?
Bang, this sort of bang, 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 bang thing that comes somewhere at the beginning.
Knocking on the door.
The knocking on the door sound. That has, amongst other things, has thrown us completely off, and we're all sitting around on stage staring at each other saying, who's gone wrong? Who's gone wrong? Where's one? Where's one?
From 1965 to 1984, Roger Waters played an integral part in the Floyd's history. He was arguably their leader, and for that period wrote many of their most memorable songs.
I think the two most important categories are the songwriting and the record production. That I would say that. I've always had very strong ideas about how to make records, and I've developed my own style, and I think I've enjoyed doing that, and the songwriting is the key, really. There's a million singers in the world, but there aren't all that many people who can write songs. I think my writing is helped by the fact that I have no particular virtuoso technique on any instrument. And I've made it my business as well to steer clear of knowing too much about the theory of music, because the more you know about the rules, I think the harder it is to break them.
Another song that's contained on Pulse is What Do You Want From Me? I have this very sick thing where I always try to read into songs and project a meaning onto it. And I know
you played that song last week.
Which one? I would just think that some of the song that I would be about an overzealous fan at all. Does that enter into this at all, or am I just hopelessly
sick?
Yes, exactly.
Trying to say,
yeah. Right.
Over to you, Dave. Is he hopelessly sick?
Over to you.
Songs start from a specific sort of point, and then they can move on into different areas. That one just started from me having an argument with my then girlfriend, now wife, and
I guess you worked it out.
It was one of the things I screamed at her. She said, good, we must use that. Which rather took the wind out of my sails. It all developed from there. You can read it any way you want, really.
Hi, I'm Dan Neer, and this is Pink Floyd's Nick Mason.
It was something we actually did regret years ago. I mean, literally 15 years ago or more, we regretted that we had not filmed Dark Side of the Moon. We didn't have a record of because it was a very good show back then, really good, and we did regret that we hadn't got any record of that live, musically or visually, in the can. We once or twice did discuss, when Roger was still in the band, whether we should put it all back together just so that we could film it, and this was like the ideal opportunity.
And they made the most of the opportunity, recording Dark Side for video and for their live album Pulse. We can't show you the video, but we are going to play Dark Side of the Moon in its entirety. Plus, we have a couple of guys along to help you see it a little more clearly.
As the black go, please.
Peace. All right, stand by. Telescan, stand by lasers. Stand by. Pod move.
We'll be behind the scenes, in front of the scenes, on stage, backstage, and high above the stage. This is going to be a very exciting show within a show, an up-close exclusive. Welcome to Media America Radio's presentation of Pink Floyd and the Dark Side of the Moon live and up close.
Stand by and go. Stand by, second, go, and go.
We also heard the controlled mania of Pink Floyd's lighting director, Mark Brickman.
Well, it's no different than a quarterback. I mean, the quarterback, it's like, he calls numbers out. He has everybody going somewhere. It's not any different than a film director directing. And if you've ever been in a booth when they're doing live sports, it's no different than a live TV director doing live basketball or live football. I mean, they're even more insane. If if they have 18 cameras or so, it's the same pace that you get into. It's the same head where it's spontaneous and it's live and it's fun. I mean, you're on, but you never know what's going to happen, and that's the best part. I mean, some of the best looks in the show are mistakes.
What we used to do in those days was we would tend to rent a rehearsal room and spend weeks in the rehearsal room throwing ideas around and writing pieces of music.
David Gilmour.
Chucking things to and fro, and we did that on that. It gradually all came together. Roger wrote a lot of good lyrics. We put it all together, and then we actually went out and performed it. We actually toured it around the world, America and everywhere, under a different name. It was called Eclipse originally, before we ever recorded it.
Nick Mason.
It's a good system for making records, really, but of course it's now entirely obsolete because of bootlegging. There's no way you dream of doing anything like that now.
When did the band actually stop performing Dark Side in its entirety? Was it 74-ish? 75?
75 on the Wish You Were Here tour, I think was.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we never got round to recording these things, is there was never a clear delineation of when a tour or a sort of particular tour stopped. That's what's changed in the sort of 80s and 90s, is that because of the size and the cost of the whole thing, the tours tend to be much more specific for the 6 months or the year or whatever. But in the sort of 70s, mid-70s, the tendency was to play the new record, and then when there was another record, you'd drop some of the old record and play the new record, and so on. So there wasn't a sort of Dark Side tour necessarily followed by the Wish You Were Here tour. I mean, things might drift slightly.
During Pink Floyd's 1987-88 tour, their production manager, Morris Lyta, gave us a little bit of inside stuff on the perfection of Floyd's live quad sound.
I've heard, it's not verified, but I've heard that they take a spoon that was made in like 1625, but it's the perfect spoon. They go to what is approximately the center of the arena, and after taking one small piece of clear light acid, drop that spoon on the floor, and they actually see the direction that the sound goes in from that spoon. And in doing that, they know where to put these quad positions so that everyone gets the perfect quad sound. And you're surrounded by it, and it's a magical thing indeed. The people that do that are kind of strange, though. Generally it's yeah. It's shortly after they drop the spoon, they're pretty much useless the rest of the day. Nice bunch of people, though.
Here's Pink Floyd's longtime associate, album artist and designer, Storm Thorgerson. He created the flashing light pulse package.
The pulsing light seemed really appropriate because of the pulse at Dark Side of the Moon, because of the heartbeat. And also because, again, the music is a large part of the show, but the lights are another large part. So since the music's on the CD, the lights can be on the package. So the light is also because, you know, it's a good light experience when you go to the show.
Eclipse, from Dark Side of the Moon, and now from Pink Floyd's Pulse CD. At this point in the Pink Floyd concert, David Gilmour sometimes takes a moment to thank Roger Waters for his monumental contributions to the immense success of Dark Side of the Moon.
It just seemed like the right thing to do. To do Dark Side of the Moon without any mention of Roger or his part in it, which was considerable, it would be churlish, to say the least.
Okay.
It would not be fair or accurate, so I felt it was important to do, just to make some mention of it on the occasions that we did Dark Side of the Moon.
Hi, I'm Dan Neer. Pink Floyd recorded their latest double CD, Pulse, while on tour in support of their last studio album, Division Bell. During that tour, the band opted for the freedom of varying their set from night to night and not sticking to the tried and true. Here's Nick Mason and David Gilmour.
I think it serves two purposes. Yes, it sustains interest on stage, particularly with the other musicians who then have to work just a little bit harder to do some of these other songs. And for an audience who quite often are coming to more than one show, I think it's quite important. Just so they get some variation and perhaps that they see that we can manage some changes in the proceedings.
Also, having already read in some in-the-know publication exactly what we were going to do that night, it's nice to then not do it.
Welcome to Part 3 of Media America Radio's presentation of Pink Floyd. Up Close. Shine On You Crazy Diamond was originally released on 1975's Wish You Were Here. David Gilmour.
Well, I think that actual song, the words for the actual song called Shine On You Crazy Diamond are about Sid.
Sid, of course, is original band member Syd Barrett.
But that part is about Sid. The rest of the album is, you know, things like Wish You Were Here, and things are not so specifically there. I'm sure Sid is included in those as well, but he's only a part of it in those ones. There was a feeling that we needed some inspiration at the time, certainly, but I don't think that's got anything to do with the words in Shine On You Crazy Diamond. I mean, I think it's just a lament, really, a wish that the guy could, you know, sort himself out and get some peace for himself in this world.
Sid actually showed up during the recording sessions for Wish You Were Here. Nick Mason and David Gilmour.
Well, it was slightly grim in a way, because yes, he turned up, and I mean, I for one certainly didn't recognize him.
He was there. The guy was just wandering around the studio for like 2 or 3 hours, and no one actually recognized him at all. Well, he was big and fat and bald.
David Gilmour and Nick Mason returned to Up Close with further memories of Wish You Were Here and following up their immensely successful The Dark Side of the Moon.
It was tortuous at the beginning. It really was a very, very difficult time at the beginning of making that record. It was not fun. Going through reassessing for yourself what you're actually in the business for, why you're doing it, and whether you still wanted to. When you've achieved as much as that, I mean, quite suddenly, all the dreams that one entered into it with had suddenly happened.
It's usually, I mean, there's usually a creative hiatus at that point, and it's also the point at which a lot of bands do start breaking up, I think. You know, most people can all pull together while they're trying to achieve the same goals, but as soon as they have, they'll actually lose the spirit of the thing.
That album has an atmosphere to it which shows that off, but I think it's wonderful. I mean, there's something about that album that I like, I think, more than any other.
I think it's partly the fact that it just drifted off onto a completely different course. It was almost the antithesis of Dark Side of the Moon. It takes all the time needed to make a point musically. I mean, it's so slow-moving in comparison with Dark Side.
A large part of Pink Floyd's lore is the flying pig. Album cover design man Storm Thorgerson remembers part of the tale.
Good old Steve, the manager, had decided very, very correctly that there might be a problem that if the pig, which was this huge, huge inflatable, talk about big balloon now, well, dirigible, was to go up in the sky for real, because we were going to do it for real, to be supported between these towers of this massive power station, then it was not to break loose, because if it were to break loose, it might cause some kind of damage. And then the insurance claims might be very heavy, or maybe it hurt somebody. So he had hired a marksman. I mean, I'd never met a marksman in my life before. This guy arrives, a little black briefcase, and sort of gets out his gun with telescopic sights. And he's staring around saying, "What's that?" You know, it's getting really heavy. So, and there he is to shoot the pig, and that's a really good idea. And then the pig don't go up. We had some kind of technical malfunction, and or rather we don't, but the dirigible people do. So the second day when the pig goes up, Steve, also for good managerial reason, decided that what he should do is not have the marksman, because the marksman was costing a lot of money per day. So, because the Sod's Law, Murphy's Law, I think you call it over there, the day the pig goes up, the marksman isn't there.
Floyd's set designer Mark Fisher picks up the twisted tale.
Got loose and went up through the flight path of Heathrow and got reported on radio by 747s coming in from America in the morning. And all of this was really true. It genuinely did happen, and I've got a set of photographs of it.
Pink Floyd Up Close returns with the voice of rebellion, David Gilmour.
Children's voices. Well, we've always argued about this since the very first time, because Roger claims that he thought of it, and I claim I thought of it. I can specifically remember thinking, God, it'd be great to have all these kids singing that. But Roger has exactly the same story, so I don't know. I certainly thought it was a great idea, and we did organise sending the tape of it off from Los Angeles, where we were, to England with a specific set of instructions to our engineer, the guy in England called Nick Griffiths, who was to do the actual work. I told him that I wanted a bunch of kids, between about 11 and 16 from North London, predominantly boys, with a few girls in as well. And he just filled up a 24-track with stereo pairs of them singing it over and over again. And then the tape arrived back in Los Angeles, and we put it up on in the studio and listened to it and went, fantastic, wow, it's wonderful. Because originally it was going to be in the background, like behind myself and Roger singing, because there was only ever one verse in that song, and it was just going to be a short one-verse piece on the record, just going from one point to tie into another point. And of course, gradually we were turning it into a disco record, disco drum part, and the rhythm guitar, which I nicked off Pick Up the Pieces by Average White Band.
Now's come time to tackle the Publius enigma. A short time ago, the internet was ablaze with the Publius...
Out of time, you gotta cut it.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I think we can just squeeze in this enigmatic comment from Pink Floyd's light maestro, Mark Brickman.
Well, I don't know. Publius Enigma, I think, was kind of like a cosmic thing. It came from, we had no control over that. It just kind of seeped into the computer one evening.
Don't despair. We've got one more Pink Floyd Up Close to go, and I promise we'll tell you more about Publius and the enigma. Hi, I'm Dan Neer. In 1984, when Pink Floyd co-founder Roger Waters left the band, the other members discovered that there was something beyond the wall and a life beyond the dark side of the moon. Here's Nick Mason.
What I began to realise was that there were so many other things to do within music, and that there were, I think it was after Dark Side and so on that I started doing more production and working with other people. Got involved in the building of Britannia Row, which was for a long time the band studio. And I mean, and we'd done a bit of film music, a bit of ballet music and so on. There are just so many other areas apart from making a hit record. And I think that was a sort of something I began to realise when we first made our first single, and Top of the Pops seemed to be the ultimate goal. One appearance on television, the world would turn and it would all be different. And it wasn't like that at all. And in fact, what tended to happen was you just kept seeing new vistas of areas that you could explore and do things in and so on. And that's still the case today, I think.
During the last 3 Up Close programs, we've been exploring the many marvelous vistas Pink Floyd has created, both through their early recordings and the brand new interpretations that can be found on their double live CD, Pulse. We continue this musical saga where we left it last time, with their 1979 classic, The Wall. Welcome to the fourth and final episode of Media America Radio's presentation of Pink Floyd. Up close, David Gilmour.
The Wall concerts they were quite fantastic. I mean, we had a great time doing them. People often ask why we didn't play more places and do more of them, but the only sort of, well, it was logistically, it was almost impossible. I don't think completely impossible, but it was almost impossible to move it around and do more places than that. But it was restricted musically, and in the end, it became not very interesting to play. I mean, by the time we'd done it 30 or 35 times, we knew it so well, but it was so structured. I mean, it's brilliant, theatrical sort of and musical piece, but there's very little room to change and to play and to have fun actually playing the music. It's all so strictly cued, and things are so strictly timed because of the films and the things going on, and the people up there building the wall at a certain speed. You know, the thing was so sort of tightly structured that once we'd all got it, I mean, the first few were so exciting because they were so terrifying, because there was so many things that could go wrong. It was absolutely terrifying at first, trying to get all this right. Of course, after we'd done it about 15 or 20 times, it became very straightforward and easy, but it was still very structured.
No one who saw the few Pink Floyd performances of The Wall can ever forget the sight of David Gilmour playing high atop the wall itself during Comfortably Numb.
Technically speaking, I was on a platform just behind the wall at the top with a railing round it, a matte black railing that no one could really see and stuff. So it looked terribly frightening for those people out there, but it was quite well done. I mean, it was quite safe, really.
Nick Mason.
I think probably it's one of the strongest images of the show is Dave on top of the wall. I mean, certainly, you know, it is a great guitar solo. Even I like it, and I mean, if a drummer likes a guitar solo, we're talking serious. But it's still one of the most sort of poignant moments of the show, and the one that people remember. But it wasn't something that had been devised from 6 months before. It was one of those last minute, I know, why don't we shoot him up the top of the wall on the left?
It took them a couple of days to pluck up the courage to ask me if I would actually do it.
After a brief hiatus, David Gilmour and Nick Mason reformed Pink Floyd and began working on what became a momentary lapse of reason. Much of the album was recorded on London's Thames River in a specially rigged boat called the Astoria. David Gilmour and Nick Mason.
It's just very, very pleasant. It's
very easy. I mean, I think it's not that it has such a specific atmosphere so much as that it's simply a very comfortable environment. I mean, studios, although in theory they're meant to be comfortable, frequently are actually rather more like sort of either very old coffee bars or sort of government buildings.
They tend to be very dark, no windows, no light, and that it often is not a very exciting prospect to imagine going and working in one of those places every day for a year or something. Whereas on the boat, you've got the river floating by and ducks and geese and whatever, swans floating by, and it is a place where it is pleasant to go and work all the time.
Let's turn back to David and Nick as they discuss a rather remarkable man who inspired a song for the Division Bell.
Stephen Hawking is a professor at Cambridge who is into all this, I don't know what you call it. Anyway, he wrote a book.
Well, let's try and think what you might call it, Dave, rather than just leaving it as a professor at Cambridge.
Astrophysics, is it? I don't know. He wrote a book called A Brief History of Time, which is about black holes. I can't understand it, let alone explain it to you, but it's a very good read, and he is a very fascinating man who was struck down by motor neurone disease when he was rather young, and now can only communicate verbally through a machine which he has to sort of type the words into with a small amount of movement that he can do with his fingers. And his sort of voice, I suppose, his voice, which is not his voice, it's an electronic voice, has become familiar to people through every time he talks on the radio, television, etc. And I heard it on an advertisement on the television for British Telecom, which is the telephone company here in England, and was for the first time, I think, in my life, moved quite significantly by a TV advertisement. And we started playing around with the voice sound from that advertisement, and then attached it to a piece of music that we were already working on, and it became Keep Talking.
Pink Floyd's great new Pulse double live CD documents their fine form during the Division Bell tour. David Gilmour and Nick Mason.
I would say it was as satisfying as any tour we've been on, for me anyway. It was, the shows themselves are terrific fun.
Yeah, and I guess at this point it just feels good that you have turned the corner, you're moving ahead, and it's all going well.
I think this last show was perhaps a bit more than that. I think it was the sort of development of. It was the best show we've done so far, and part of that was because we were able to build on what we'd done on the 87-88 tour, in terms of just building a new stage, but knowing what we wanted to avoid, which was the big black box, which had become the standard rock sort of environment. And I think just sort of moving on and doing that in itself was, to me, it felt like, as I say, just a real step forward, and a particularly good tour from that point of view.
Last summer, a person or persons unknown, using the alias Publius, began posting anonymous messages to the alt.music.Pink Floyd Usenet news group. The posts offer ambiguous but mysterious clues regarding Pink Floyd's The Division Bell CD. The gist of the messages invited fans to look at the album with open minds in order to solve an enigma which could be found in the music, lyrics, album art, and so on. The reward for open-minded and cooperative investigation, according to Publius, would be a singular but unspecified prize. The news group became annoyed, but curiosity continued. Was Publius a messenger, as she claimed, or just a prankster? Publius promised to sign during the Pink Floyd July 1994 show at Giant Stadium in New Jersey. He delivered. In the middle of Keep Talking, the lights at the front of the stage spelled out Enigma Publius. Even the staid New York Times picked up the story, and Publius's credibility was enhanced, to say the least. Speculators have suggested the answer to the enigma can be found on Easter Island, or perhaps in Ely Cathedral, which stands near the group's early running grounds in Cambridge. There's a lot of geography in between. You get the idea. Who is Publius? What is the enigma? No one knows for sure. Neither the band or its management will confirm any connection with Publius. Listen to this offhand comment from Pink Floyd's lighting designer, Mark Brickman.
We had all the stuff in the front and the computerized grid in the front, which put out names. I think one was called Publius Enigma or something I've read about.
Does that sound like a man who is telling all he knows? When pushed further, Mark said,
well, I don't know. Publius Enigma, I think, was kind of like a cosmic thing. We had no control over that. It just kind of seeped into the computer one evening.
We may never know the whole truth about Publius. Perhaps the enhanced communication the enigma has ignited the world over is the answer. Keep searching. High Hopes, recorded live for Pink Floyd's Pulse, an album that goes right to the heart of the matter. It's a live retrospective of the very impressive career of Pink Floyd and a document of their last tour. Here's Nick Mason.
It goes back to the Moment She Laps the Reason tour, and we actually did delve through everything that we thought we could ever possibly want to do, and we put together a set of all the songs that we wanted to play, and this time we delved again because we thought we don't want to do the same show, exactly the same set. We wanted to chop and change around, and we also wanted to have to change each night a little bit, so we needed a few extra things, and also we thought it'd be good fun to have an entire retrospective from the very earliest days, 1967, right through to now. So, and it was jolly good fun.
We'd like to thank Steve O'Rourke and Jane Sen of MCA Productions, Paul Rappaport, Jim Del Balzo, and Lisa Strauss of Columbia Records, and Jamie Chernin of Capitol Records. Special thanks to the Bridge Studios in London. Part 4 of Pink Floyd Up Close was produced in New York by Media America Radio, exclusively for the Media America Radio Network. The producers are David Bales, Jim Fahey, and me, Dan Neer, assisted by Steve Karish. The executive producers are Ron Hartenbaum and Gary Schoenfeld. Up Close is distributed on compact disc and copyrighted 1995, all rights reserved. No portion may be used without the written permission of the producers. Join us next time on this station for more of the best in rock. Up Close. Don't miss it.